This is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about Ynnari, Craft Worlds, and Friends, and it's just a look at how I've kind of developed a style of play for them that's worked for me, and kind of talking about my experiences with the Army competitively. I've managed to get to 4 tournaments with them since I've started playing them, and we're going to kind of touch on my takeaways. Sorry if I sound a little rough. Just had a really bad case of the flu I'm still getting over, so if I'm a little hoarse or scratchy, that's why. We're going to talk about tournaments that I've gotten to play in. We're going to address the strength of schedule. And what I mean by that is just the level of players that have been at some of these tournaments. So it's one thing to go, 2-1. It's another thing to go 2-1 when you're playing with a lot of really high skilled players. So we're going to go over some of my early issues, what some of the fixes are, what are units that I think are staple units based on how I'm playing them, and then strategies that I've also started using. I did play in an RTT. It wasn't a super competitive one. There were some good players there, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't call it a competitive one. The TO didn't really seem too involved or interested in running a competitive event, and it kind of reflected with the player base, and that's fine. I'm not in any way knocking him for it. I'm just saying this one I fully expected to kind of do well at, and I did. I went 2-1. My only loss was to the overall winner, and he was playing demons, and that was my first time playing against that demons book, so he did a good job of trying to avoid having a bunch of gotcha moments. And I do appreciate him for that. He was a wonderful opponent to play against. He was very funny and friendly. Um, but typically if I haven't played against a book before, I'm probably dropping that first game, mostly because I'm spending more time kind of absorbing everything that's going on, processing it so that when I come back to it, I can play against it better, you know. And then I went down to Indy and played in an ATC event, and I managed to play against Death Guard, Grey Knights, and Orcs. So I hit 2 Armor of Contempt armies. Not my favorite thing to play against right now. My one loss was against the Grey Knights, and that was, really because I didn't have a good build for scoring points. I had a build that was good at killing things, and I had one secondary in mind, and I also had one really huge misplay with the Incarn, and that definitely. And he and I talked about it afterward, and I've mentioned it before. He even was just like, man, that definitely made sure you didn't win. Not that I win if I don't misplay the Incarn as a guarantee, but just that put the nail in the coffin that prevents me from winning. I did absolutely crush the Death Guard player and the Orc player. The Death Guard player, super nice dude, and he's pretty good. He wasn't, he was a good player. I just have the benefit of, like one of my favorite things to do in this game is to just kill things in power armor, and you know they're in power armor, and so and he had never played against the Incarn, and that arguably also has a big influence on it. If nobody's played against the Incarnate, it can be a little overwhelming. And then the Orc player, well, as an Orc player, and I've played that codex for decades at this point, I just had the advantage. I knew the book better than he did. So there was nothing he was gonna do that was gonna surprise me. Generally, I knew all the little tricks and moves he was going to do. Super nice dude, and he did a great job. He really did, you know. And he always had a great attitude. We play a lot at events, so both of those, like I said, my list wasn't built for anything other than just doing the warp ritual psychic interrogation. Either one. I know a lot of people prefer psychic interrogation because it has a higher ceiling. I prefer warp ritual because it has a lower commitment. You only have to do it for 3 turns, and it's one of those where it's a lot easier to overcome bad dice because you only have to do it for 3 turns. Or if you're playing against an opponent who can deny it, if they deny it twice, it's not a big deal because you can still get your 12 points. Whereas, if somebody denies your psychic interrogation twice, well, then guess what? You've now just capped at 9, you know. And it's funny because I mean I've definitely had some bad dice because I'm using the Warlock to quicken, which a lot of Craft World players will know the combo. You go, you do your psychic action, and then your Warlock quickens your Farseer out of there. And I'm just using a Warlock on foot. But I have definitely perils with that Warlock more times than I have not perils with that Warlock. And it's just kind of one of those funny interactions. And it is what it is. It's super funny. But no, that's why I prefer Warp Ritual. It's a little bit easier. I could probably do Psychic Interrogation, and for some armies I probably would. If you don't have any wizards, I probably will. The other thing about Psychic Interrogation is if I know you're taking it against me, I'm probably just screaming my characters at you unless there's a reason for me not to. Because if I can just charge you with my characters and then you kill them, I can shut off your secondary. I did play in a competitive RTT, and that was actually one that I was running, and then we had an odd number, and I ended up just playing in it. And that one was pretty competitive. There were quite a few players in the top 10% of the region, and that does include myself. And there's quite a few of us that are in the top like 10 to 12, 10 to 15% in the nation. So these are some competitive guys and gals. In this situation, it was all guys, but some of these events did have some ladies, so I want to make sure I'm including them. These are some very competitive humans that are getting ready to play this game. I did go 1 and 2 instead of 2 and 1. My two losses were one was against the meta NIDS list, with the multiple units of the Zoanthropes and all the other stuff, the Harpies. And I lost by 10, and really it was because I misplayed the Incarn and I didn't have a backup for R&D. Those two things, 10-point loss. And the guy piloting it is a top 100 US NIDS player. So again, these aren't just Joe Blow picking up his NIDS and coming to play. Like these are guys who go and they place well at opens and GTs and all these things that we're playing against. And I lost against Tau. And again, that was like a 5-point game, I think. And again, that one came down to I didn't have a backup for R&D because this is when I started really working on that one. And he didn't have anything good to score into him. You know, I had a lot of vehicles, so he could bring it down and get a lot of points and monsters. So I've since kind of refined and adjusted. But yeah, no, it was a good game, 5-point game, and again, I didn't. Arguably, I misplayed the Incarn there also, but it's really hard not to against Tau because they can just be wherever they want and can shoot almost anything off the table with almost any of their units. Their 80-point breachers can shoot a lot of things off the table and hit way above their weight class and still be in your deployment zone turn one. So it's one of those where it's really hard to say I misplayed her because again, there's not a lot you can do in that situation. Like I said, I kind of refined a little bit. I had pointed in one unit of warp spiders, but I didn't bring any scourges. I needed a second deep strike unit to consistently perform R&D, and that was my takeaway from that. And it didn't have to be scourges. That's just the unit I ended up playing around with when I did it, because I am going to be leaning in Drukhari later. So it's one of those where I figured I'd just bring them in, kind of give them a test run, see how they interact, see how they feel, if they do what they're supposed to do. And so that was my takeaway from that game. So then we did a small team tournament, kind of like an ATC, and I ended up going 2-1. I lost to Chaos Knights, and man, so the Chaos Knights game is a little weird, and I'll kind of get into that later. Um, but same concepts as before. I brought the spiders, but this time I brought the scourges, and they gave me a lot more flexibility. So I was able to get R&D. I don't think I scored less than 12 on it. I think I got all 12 every game on that one. So early issues, like I said, I had a lack of consistent scoring options. Hidden Path is only good for specific missions. There's not really, I think that's what it's called. It's the one where you control the objective or your webway gate. It's only good for specific missions. I am not sold for Scout the Enemy for Ynnari. I need to give it a try, but I just don't want to commit to Rangers and I don't want to give up my Kabalites. Like 2 units of Rangers might be enough for Scout the Enemy. Again, I just need to give it a try. But Kabalites are so cheap, and that gives them a lot of utility because you can kind of put them anywhere you need to. It's a small footprint. They can do their R&D or any other action they need to. The other thing to keep in mind, technically Yanari can't take Asuryani secondary objectives, which does limit their scoring options. Again, I've never been to an event that said I couldn't. I'm just saying rules as written, they can't. And I think I did touch on that in my Yanari video. There's going to be a card up at the top there for you to check that out. Because if you can't, then they're not even a competitively playable army. Now, the Codex secondaries you can, but the Nephilim secondaries you can't. And I think it was, yeah, I did, because I do believe that one's an oversight. I don't think that was a rules as intended interaction. Warp Ritual and Psychic Interrogation, like I said, that's been great, but I'd like to be able to do something else to score points. Like only having that as my one staple where I can just guarantee scoring that every game gets a little old. I'd like to try to start looking at different things. And those first 2 tournaments that I played in, those were my first 6 to 7 games with this army. I had not put it on the table but maybe one time before taking it to a tournament. And so, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I'm kind of growing with the army. I'm figuring things out as we grow and move on and refine. Some of the first fixes and issues that I had were with primaries. And my first fix was addressing those struggles with the primary objectives. So like I said, I'm an orc player. As an orc player, I can flood the board. I can bring a lot of units. They aren't necessarily hard to kill, but they're not easy to kill either. It sounds weird to say it like that, but they can. They can flood the board, and that was my first interaction with them. Was like, I'm gonna just orc you, and it didn't work. I got brutally massacred. So I had to kind of change the way I approach. And really, since that game specifically, I just started trying to train myself to cut the board in half, cut the board in half. And when I did that, I could just focus on controlling half the board at a time. I don't have to have the whole board. So what I've done is I've just kind of looked at the table, looked at deployments, kind of figured out what my opponent's trying to do, and just decided, okay, I'm going to give them this. They can have it for now. And then I'm going to try and take this little piece, and then I'm going to try and take that little piece, and we're just going to kind of work our way up the board. And that's helped me slow down. I've realized that just because I can move 16 inches with that wave serpent doesn't mean I have to. Like there's no gold medal for getting across that finish line first in this game. So what had ended up happening is I usually end up giving up primary points to my opponents early in the game and then trying to bait them into a mistake, trying to isolate units and then taking them on, like I said, a little bit at a time rather than a full frontal assault. And it's helped. It's helped a lot. I've also started trying to look at other secondaries I can score. Like I said, I went to R&D. Yes, it caps at 12, but it is easy to get if you build for it. So yeah, you're not getting your full 15 points, but for an army that, and thanks to some awesome info, a guy I just met, he runs Proxy Hammer. Just got into his channel, super cool. He focuses specifically on Craft World Eldar. One of the videos I just watched from him, I just subscribed to him. You should check him out. And again, he didn't ask me to do this. Like his content is good. He just seems like a good dude that loves his elves. One of the things he pointed out is their average around, I think it was like 64 points a game. Obviously, that's before paint. It's 74 after paint. However you want to look at it, it doesn't matter. But if you're averaging 64, 65 points a game, I don't think you can poo-poo your nose, like, oh, this is only scoring 12. Well, if competitively your army's only scoring 65 points a game, you should probably take your 12 points and shut up. Stop worrying about trying to get 15. Once you get that 12 and can get it consistently, then you worry about the 15. Let's see. One of the other fixes I did was, warp spiders for R&D specifically, because one of the Exarch powers lets them teleport, so they get to bounce. So you can actually get 2 table quarters out of your warp spiders, and it's super handy. And you can get more than that because their movement's bonkers and their battle focus move is real good. But then you're also, shooting them and doing other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you play them differently based on what you expect out of them. I expect them to come down, do a deep strike, get R&D, and then if they're still alive, I'm going to bounce them to another quarter, get R&D, and then they can shoot. I also brought the last tournament I went to. I brought a unit of scourges just for that redundancy, and that helped a ton. Like I said, once I brought the scourges, I don't think I've scored less than the full on it, and that's a tournament or just even tune-up games and stuff. The singles tournament I went to, there I went 1-2. Both of those losses could have easily been wins, just based off of that one change. Um, because I think I got 4 points against the top player on R&D, if I remember right, and so that would have put me at 12. Like that would have put me in the lead, just having that. And then the Tyranid player, I think I don't remember how many I scored on it, but even just having the extra points could have drastically changed the way that game went. Because I was basically playing from behind the whole game, which is generally how I play anyway. It's not intentional; it just has to do with the way I play the game. I tend to play for the not alpha strike and then just kind of go from there. The last 2 events I went to, I also started bringing a raider full of incubi, and I have nothing but positives to say about that. I've heard mixed reviews on Incubi. Oh, they're good. Oh, they're bad. Blah 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 blah. And to me, if you're bringing them in a brick of 10, there's nothing bad that's going to come from that as long as you can get them where they need to go. The other thing to keep in mind is all these fixes that I'm talking about, all these point scoring things. Yes, I am talking about Yanari, but a lot of them can just be applied to your craft worlds. Obviously, you can't bring Incubi, but there are things that you could bring that are analogous. There are also things you could bring that are analogous to scourges, obviously just like more warp spiders. Now that I've gotten some games in with them, I will tell you because of the way I'm playing them presently, I feel like Rangers and Cablites are just my staple troops. They're cheap, they're versatile, they have good interactions, a lot of utility. You don't feel bad if they're doing actions because their shooting isn't amazing, but it's not so terrible that when you're rolling dice at things, you're just like, I'm wasting my time. I have a brick of 10 Howling Banshees that goes in a Wave Serpent. I usually give them the 4-up invuln when they're in melee. They don't, man, they don't even have to hit the table. Just them being in the transport and the transport being on the table is enough sometimes. Because if your opponent knows what they do, they're just going to kind of try to either A, avoid them, or really, really commit to trying to kill them. And if they do kill them, that can hurt you. I definitely get that. But man, like those wave serpents are a little bit more tanky than you realize, especially if you keep some strands of fate dice handy to just auto pass some saves here and there. If you get some lucky strands of fate dice to keep those wave serpents on the table, it will benefit you greatly. The other difference, actually, going back to that, the other difference between my list that I ran at the singles and then the list that I ran at the team event is I had a Wraith Lord at the singles, and I didn't really have any tanks. And I've also started kind of working in 2 Fire Prisms and dropped the Wraith Lord. And that has also just made a significant difference in my ability to just intimidate and kind of dictate the flow of the game. 10 Incubi and a Raider, like I said. The main thing there is that, man, like they can just kill whatever the Banshees can't. If their strength 5, and then with the Yanari being able to give +1 to wound to a core unit, and Incubi have core, and then Yanari also having the spell where you can pick an enemy unit and your hit rolls of 6 auto wound, you can actually slam those into a lot of things. And with their 2 damage weapons that go to 3 damage on wound rolls of 6, they will absolutely blend just about anything they touch. That game I lost against the Chaos Knights, I only killed like three, maybe four of his knights, and it was all the little ones. But it was the incubi that did most of it. Like they'd hit it, it would go away. They'd hit it, it would go away. Warp spiders, like I said, even if I don't take R&D, I think I still take warp spiders because if the Exarch takes the second death spinner, it's 6d6 shots coming out of that unit. It's just so many dice. It is absolutely bonkers, and they have blast. So like those warp spiders, I ended up playing a Death Guard player, and it was the last tournament I went to, and he had the Poxwalker hordes, and those warp spiders were just blending, like picking up whole units of Poxwalkers. It was absurd. Obviously, the Farseer Warlock for the quick and warpcraft combo. I do want to try to get away from that a little bit, just to try to see if we can find other ways to score, come up with some other things. Because now that I've gotten, again, now that I've gotten a good grasp on the army and how to kind of pilot it and handle it, I think now we're safe to kind of explore some of the other options for scoring points. And obviously the Incarn, because, that's just what she is and who she is. And if you're playing this army and you're not using the Incarn, I don't understand why you're even playing it. There's so many other armies you could play. Some of the things that I have picked up as I've kind of lost games, won games, and learned is, hey, remember I have a redeploy strat. And I do tell people about it, so it's never just I got you good. It's one of the first things I tell players when I hit the table with them is, hey, just a friendly courtesy. I've got a redeploy strat, just so you know. That way, when I use it, even if they forgot, I can at least be like, hey, man, I did let you know. I'm not going to tell you 5 times at a tournament, but I will at least tell you once. And if you ask, I'm obviously going to tell you. But remembering it, and that was honestly probably why I lost to the Chaos Knights, is just forgetting about it and not using it. Because he went first and he was able to shoot one of my fire prisms. Now, and like I said, that was a weird game. And dice, I don't normally like blame my games on dice, but that one definitely had some poopy dice. Like everything that could have went wrong, that game did. Like turn one, uh, he moved up his Chaos Knight, shot at my Fire Prism, hitting on 4, wounding on 4. He only had 2 shots to do it. 100% hit wounded because I -1 to hit him, blah, 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 blah. It still died. I got the 6. It exploded. It did 3 mortal wounds to everything around me. Then I failed the leadership on the Rangers, and then I failed the combat attrition. So, like, I just picked up so much of my army before I even got to do anything just because of crazy dice. And that's not even like where it ended. But again, that was still a winnable game. It's just that right there is probably what lost it, was just forgetting and not using my redeploy strat to pull those fire prisms up into strategic reserve, because then he's got to be more honest. He's got to stay a little bit back, stay a little bit less aggressive, because if I can jump those behind him and get them behind terrain and just start picking off his big knights, that's it. That's the end of the game. So that's my fault. I should have remembered, and that is a thing that I've got to keep in mind. I have used it though, and I've used it to kind of fake out opponents so that I can get secure or hidden path or whatever it's called. Especially on the corners deployment with the 4 objectives in the middle. What is that? Data Scry salvage, I think. I will take hidden path on that one every time. It is so good. Let's see. Outside of that, when I transition to a mono Drukhari army in 2023, I plan to play Poison Tongue. I already play them when I play Drukhari just because of the redeploy strat, and I also just like their interactions. Like the Poison 3 is really good. I know a lot of people are like, nah, this is not the best way, and that's fine. Maybe it's not the best way, and maybe it's not the most efficient way. I just like the Poison 3 interaction, and I like the redeploy strat. And that transition to mono Drukhari is simply because, like my kids are shit talkers, and my daughter was like, "Well, let's see if you can do good with this army." And I was like, "All right, let's check it out." And that was the army she picked. So, in the games that I've played, I've had an average score of 79 at the singles tournament, which is 69 without paint. Interestingly, I lost more games than I won, and I had a higher average score than I did the last tournament I went to, where I went 2-1. And really, it's pretty close. And those games were really close that I lost at the singles tournament, so I can't complain. And what threw my average off in the doubles or in the last tournament was that Chaos Knights game. I only scored 39 points, and like I said, I really just botched that game. And there was a lot going on there. Player was pretty good. I botched it. I was also like the first day out of having a really bad flu. Like I was struggling. So it was just an interesting interaction all around. But I did find out, like, hey, remember the redeploy, build for two specific secondaries, and slow down, and just worry about half the table at a time. Like, those were the big takeaways from the four tournaments that I've managed to do, and I've managed to do them in like 2 or 3 months. So I'm looking forward to a lot of events next year with the Drukhari, and I'm going to be doing lists or videos like this on them, and probably orcs, and probably more Yanari as we kind of go on. I just want to thank everybody for listening. I hope this video was helpful. Uh, as always, Patreon tiers, hatchlings, $1.50, mentioned on the Patreon's page, Firebird, $5 early access to all content and ability to vote on future content. Phoenix is $10, all of the above and a sticker, and then Immortals $20. You get all of that and a shirt, and a special shout out at the end of the video. And as always, we're going to be shouting out the two Immortals right now, Captain Too Tall and the real Donnie G. Like I've mentioned before, those guys have been amazing. They've done great work in supporting me, and it's allowed me to continue to run events and get bigger and bigger with my terrain and table setups. Thanks for watching. Check out these awesome links: Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Links in the description. And then once again, hey, I'm going to put Dude's channel in the description. Proxy Hammer. Check his videos out if you're a Craft Worlds player. He does good content. He really does a good job of just kind of breaking down and explaining things, and he's got some cool hobby videos. So just wanted to give him another shout out. Check him out. Thanks a lot, guys.